Room 412 was a sanctuary of silence, broken only by the steady beeping of monitors and the faint whisper of air moving through a ventilator. Cold white light filtered through the thick glass wall, casting a pale glow on the motionless face of the man lying in bed. To anyone passing by, Ethan Carrington looked like a man on the edge of death. IVs snaked into his veins, monitors blinking out the fragility of life, painting a picture that made most people instinctively lower their voices and move along with reverence. But behind those shuttered eyelids was not a dying man. It was a mind sharp, calculating, alive with purpose. Every heartbeat, every measured breath was part of an intricate performance, carried out with terrifying precision. It had been 3 weeks since the so-called accident. 3 weeks trapped between the illusion of helplessness and the thrill of secret clarity. And somehow, they had been the most real weeks of Ethan's life. For the first time, he was seeing the empire he had built, not through the lens of power or privilege, but as an invisible observer, as a ghost in his own kingdom. The twisted wreckage of his black Mercedes still haunted the local news cycle. That crumpled image looped in his mind like a cruel refrain, accompanied by the voice of a reporter that had burned itself into his memory. Hospital magnate Ethan Carrington remains in critical condition after a single-car crash on Highway 9 that police are calling suspicious. Suspicious was putting it lightly. Ethan remembered everything. The winding descent toward his estate, the sudden stiffness of the steering wheel, the brake pedals sinking uselessly under his foot, the metallic tang of panic when he realized this wasn't mechanical failure. Someone wanted him dead. They had failed, but not completely, because while he lived he was confined, silenced. At least, that's what they thought. Now, lying in a hospital he built with his bare hands, Ethan had the perfect vantage point to observe, to listen, to unravel. He was a phantom king on an invisible throne, watching as his kingdom began to rot from the inside out. The plan wasn't born from delirium. It came to him in the first lucid moments after the crash. Bloodied but clear-headed, Ethan had caught a snippet of conversation between 2 paramedics at the scene. "Shame about Carrington. Word is the board's already making moves. They don't think he's gonna make it." That sentence cut deeper than the glass lodged in his ribs. It was also the spark that lit a dangerous fire in his mind. This was his moment. He wouldn't waste it. A daring deception was born, not to hide from death but to stare it down, to outwit it, and most importantly to expose the betrayal festering within his walls. Only one person knew the truth: Marcus Webb, his closest friend, his legal counsel, his confidant for over 2 decades. At first Marcus had been furious. Pacing in Ethan's private recovery suite, he had muttered in disbelief, "This is insane, Ethan. You can't just vanish from your own life. What about the business? What about your people? What about the person who tried to kill me?" Ethan had countered, his voice hoarse but burning with determination. "I built Carrington Medical from nothing," he rasped. 15 years ago we were a one-room clinic. Now we're the most trusted private hospital in 3 states. But lately, something's been off. Invoices that don't add up, medical supply orders that disappear into thin air, meetings where people go silent the second I walk in the room." Marcus had studied his friend's face carefully. The bruises, the oxygen tube, the fury beneath the calm. "You really think someone inside?" "I don't think," Ethan whispered. "I know." "And this accident?" "It was no accident. My car was serviced 2 days earlier. Everything was perfect, but someone tempered with the brakes, locked the steering. They wanted me gone. And next time, they'll make sure I don't walk away." What they put into motion next was madness disguised as method. Marcus would handle the legal front, quietly acting as interim CEO under the guise of emergency protocol. Ethan, meanwhile, would stage a slow, believable decline into a medically induced coma, unresponsive to stimuli but stable, just enough to keep life support unquestioned. Convincing Marcus had been hard. Convincing Dr. Sarah Martinez, Ethan's longtime personal physician, had been nearly impossible. Sarah's face had gone ghostly when she heard the plan. "Are you out of your mind?" she had whispered. "I can't condone this." But that changed the moment Ethan handed her the forensic report, the one Marcus had commissioned in secret. The report didn't talk about mechanical failure. It concluded in chilling clarity that the brake lines had been sliced, clean, precise, the kind of work done by someone who meant to end a life. From that moment, Sarah had been silent, but she stayed. Now, after 3 weeks of perfect stillness, Ethan had become something beyond ordinary. His other senses had sharpened. He knew the night nurse's footsteps from the charge nurses. He had memorized the cleaning schedule. He could distinguish conversations down the hall, the rhythm, the pauses, even the tension between staff members he'd never met. But memory wasn't enough. So Marcus had installed a discreet recording device in the hospital bed frame. Everything was logged: voices, whispers, arguments, hours of audio data, and already patterns had begun to emerge. Day shift nurses spoke freely near him, oblivious to the ears that listened. Ethan learned the board had met 3 times since his accident. Each session focused on succession plans and the future of hospital leadership. And one name kept surfacing: Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, chief of surgery, ambitious, calculating, and suddenly very helpful in his absence. She had stepped up, volunteered for more administrative responsibility, positioned herself as a savior during chaos. But Ethan knew better than to trust heroics that appeared too perfectly timed. And it was the night shift that brought the truth. After dark, when the upper brass had gone home and the sterile professionalism wore off, staff spoke freely. Maintenance techs whispered about extra shifts and unregistered installations. The cleaning crews rushed, afraid to be seen lingering in certain areas. Even the security staff talked about cameras being redirected, blind spots created. On the 15th night of his charade, Ethan heard the moment everything changed. Hawthorne's voice, unmistakable, floated through the cracked door. "It's going smoother than expected," she said with unnerving calm. "With Carrington out of the picture, we can finally push through the changes we've been blocked from making." Another voice, male, uncertain. "What about the charity fund restructuring?" "Necessary," she replied. "It'll free up critical resources." A pause. "And if he wakes up?" Hawthorne didn't hesitate. "Look," Hawthorne replied coldly, her voice laced with clinical certainty. "Dr. Martinez has confirmed his condition. Brain activity is minimal, and even if he does wake up, the likelihood of cognitive damage is extremely high. Either way, the board retains full authority to make the necessary decisions for the hospital's future." Ethan had to summon every ounce of discipline to keep his body perfectly still. His heart rate spiked. Monitors responded with a sudden uptick of beeping that flirted dangerously close to exposure. He couldn't let them know. Not yet. If they discovered he was aware, conscious, calculating, it would all be over. There would be no second chance, and he still hadn't uncovered the full extent of the darkness swirling beneath the surface. As the voices in the hallway faded into silence, a storm built inside Ethan. A whirlwind of fury, disbelief, and heartbreak. The charity fund. It wasn't just a financial entity. It was sacred. It was the soul of Carrington Medical, a living tribute to his late wife, Catherine. She had passed from cancer when their daughter Lily was only 12, and out of that loss, Ethan had built something that would live on. A fund to ensure that no child would be denied medical care because of money. Over $2 million, 0 cents, sat in that account. Not just dollars, but symbols of hope, compassion, and Catherine's unwavering spirit. And now they were trying to steal it. A sound broke through his rising anger. Soft, almost imperceptible. The door creaked open a little wider. Footsteps entered the room, light and tentative, completely different from the confident strides of most medical staff. A woman stepped in. He knew that from the faint rustle of her scrubs, the quiet inhale, and the familiar scent of lavender hand lotion that clung to the air like a ghost of kindness. Ethan kept his breath steady, face slack, limbs limp, the perfect illusion of unconsciousness. He could sense her presence as she paused beside his bed, but she didn't announce herself. She didn't check his vitals, adjust equipment, or speak with routine formality. She simply stood there, surrounded by darkness and silence. And then she began to cry. Not loudly. These were careful, broken sobs, the kind someone holds in for too long. She was trying to be quiet, as if even her guilt might disturb the man she believed couldn't hear her. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the machines. "I'm so sorry for what I've done." Ethan felt something inside him twist. Not fear, not even anger. It was something else entirely. Pain. This wasn't part of the script. She took a shaky breath. He could hear the sound of fabric, maybe a sleeve wiping her nose, or tissues crinkling in her hands. Through his almost closed eyelids, he caught a fleeting glimpse of her. Young, dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her uniform the soft blue of the night shift. "Mr. Carrington," she said again, her voice hoarse with tears. "I don't know if you can hear me in there, but I need to tell someone. I can't carry this alone anymore." Ethan had to resist every instinct to open his eyes, to sit up, to ask the question burning in his chest. But he knew this moment was fragile, and people only confess their deepest truths when they believe no one is listening. "My name is Clara Reyes," she said gently, lowering herself into the plastic chair beside his bed with a quiet creak. "I've been your night nurse for the past 2 weeks, since Nurse Patterson went on maternity leave." Her voice trembled. "I've been taking care of you every night, making sure your meds are on time, checking your vitals every hour." Then came the silence. A pause that stretched, heavy and aching. Ethan heard her sniffle, steadying herself, trying to hold on, and then the words hit him like a physical blow. "I've been stealing from you, Mr. Carrington. From you, from this hospital, from the charity fund that everyone says meant so much to you and your wife." The confession poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. $347,000. That's how much I've taken. Over the last 8 months, I know the exact amount because I've tracked every dollar. Every lie I told. Every transfer I made to cover my tracks. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The fund. Catherine's legacy. The reason he worked late nights. Why he poured his grief into building something bigger than himself. And now the woman sitting beside him, this young nurse, was telling him she'd been draining it, while he lay helpless. But Clara wasn't finished. "I know what you must think of me," she said, her voice barely holding together. "I know what everyone would think if they knew. A thief, a criminal, someone who took advantage of a dying man, someone who stole from children who needed help." She broke again, her words strangled with emotion. "But I swear to you, I never kept a cent for myself." Ethan's steady breathing faltered for the briefest second. What was she saying? "There's a place." Clara's voice picked up, fast and breathless now, as though she needed to say it all before the courage vanished. "A refugee camp in northern Syria, near the Turkish border. The children there, they have nothing. No medicine, no doctors, no hope." Ethan heard the rustling of paper, folded documents from her pocket. I brought everything with me. Every surgery, every child, every dollar I spent. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. There's Amara. She's 7. She needed heart surgery. $12,000, 0 cents. Without it, she wouldn't have lived to see 8. Then there's Khalil. He's 4. Brain tumor, 2 operations, $28,000, 0 cents. The room filled with the soft rustle of documents as Clara unfolded them. Ethan could hear the conviction rising behind her tears. I work with a small medical missionary group in the camp. Dr. Elena Vasquez runs it. She used to be with Doctors Without Borders, but she left because the red tape was killing kids. Approvals took too long, funding came too late. Clara leaned in, her voice almost pleading. I know what I did was wrong. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed your wife's memory. I betrayed everything this hospital stands for. But those kids, they had no one else. No insurance, no government support, no families who could save them, and I had access to money that could. Ethan didn't know what to feel. Rage, despair, or something far more complicated. Respect? She had stolen, yes, but she had done it to save lives. While everyone else around him plotted and stole for greed, this woman had risked her career for strangers. I kept thinking about your wife, Clara continued, her voice now calm, thoughtful. Everyone says she loved helping children, that the fund was her dream, her legacy. I kept telling myself, maybe, just maybe, she'd understand. Maybe she'd forgive me. She inhaled deeply. I'm going to pay it back. Every last cent. I've already started. I've taken extra shifts, sold everything I own. It might take 10 years, maybe more, but I will repay it. With interest. She rose from the chair. Ethan heard her gently fold the papers and slide them back into her pocket. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect anyone's. But I needed you to know I'm not a thief driven by greed. I'm just someone who couldn't watch children die when I had the power to help them. Her footsteps headed toward the door. Then she paused. The surgery reports, the records, the photos, they're all in your nightstand drawer. When you wake up, you'll know exactly where the money went. And you'll know that 23 children are alive today because of your wife's fund. I just hope that means something to you. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Ethan was alone again, surrounded by the artificial rhythm of machines, sounds that no longer offered comfort, but now served as the ticking countdown to the moment he would have to choose between justice and compassion. In every version of corruption he had imagined, he had never accounted for someone like Clara. A criminal moved by conscience, a thief whose weapon was mercy. Now, Ethan had to ask himself the hardest question of all. What is justice, really, when the guilty have saved more lives than the innocent ever dared to? The next morning came with a knock. 3 short raps, too long. Only Marcus used that pattern. Ethan stayed still, playing his role as the man lost in coma. Marcus entered with a stack of legal documents, his tone loud and formal. "Morning, old friend," he said, just loud enough for anyone outside to hear. "I brought some papers for whenever you wake up." Then, dropping his voice to a whisper, "We need to talk. Things are moving faster than we thought." Marcus slid into the chair Clara had used only hours before. Ethan longed to open his eyes, to see the face behind the voice. But he remained motionless, relying on every subtle change in tone, every pause, signals that the situation had just become even more dangerous. "The board meeting yesterday was enlightening," Marcus began, flipping open a folder. One of many props used to maintain their charade. His voice was casual, but Ethan heard the weight behind every word. "Hawthorne's making her move. She's managed to convince half the board that your chances of recovery are minimal, that decisive action needs to be taken now, for the hospital's good. Ethan's jaw tightened, just slightly. A small, nearly imperceptible motion, but enough to feel the burn of blood rushing with rising fury. He's pushing what she's calling an emergency restructuring initiative. And the charity fund? That's only her first target. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. She wants to reallocate all major resources to what she calls high-efficiency medical programs. In other words, services that turn the highest profit margins. Forget comprehensive care, forget compassion. This is about turning Carrington Medical into a machine that prints money. Ethan felt as though his heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from rage. Everything Clara had tearfully confessed now took on a more sinister light. If Hawthorne discovered the missing funds, how long before Clara became her perfect scapegoat? But, Marcus said, drawing the word out like a blade, I found something else. Ethan's pulse quickened. Dug into the accounts you personally authorized access to, the ones only you and a few key people should have been able to touch. And what I found, it's not just Clara. Someone has been siphoning money on a much larger scale, systematically, over years. Ethan felt his body clench beneath the surface, a storm building behind his still expression. More than $800,000, Marcus whispered. Gone. Routed through what looked like legitimate charities. Beautiful websites, noble missions, the whole works. But no real operations, no staff, no patients, just fronts. He turned a page in the folder, the soft rustle of paper echoing like a courtroom gavel. But the Syrian medical camp Clara mentioned, that's real. I confirmed it. Dr. Elena Vasquez is real. The surgeries happened. The children are real. All 23 of them. Ethan felt a wave of breathless relief. Clara hadn't lied. Every word she'd cried in the dark had been true. But Marcus wasn't done. I traced the authorization signatures on the fake transfer orders, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you want to guess whose name is on every single one? Ethan didn't move. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne. He said the name slowly, deliberately, like peeling back the final layer of a long-buried lie. He's been embezzling from your wife's legacy for years, carefully hidden behind administrative jargon and fake projects, every single transaction justified with just enough plausible deniability. It all clicked into place with a cold, sickening clarity. Hawthorne hadn't just stepped into a power vacuum when Ethan was incapacitated. She'd created it. The accident. The charity audit. Clara's confession. All of it was part of a strategy. Not a scramble, but a premeditated dismantling of everything Ethan had built. And there's more, Marcus continued, lowering his voice to a near murmur. I've been talking to a few nurses. Quietly. Nothing that would raise suspicion. He hesitated, then said with something close to reverence, Clara Reyes is respected, loved even. Patients adore her. She spends her breaks reading to elderly patients. She brings homemade soup to those who can't afford cafeteria meals. She even organized a fundraiser when a janitor's child needed surgery. Ethan's chest ached, not from pain, but something deeper. Something like shame. How had someone like Clara become the hunted? But the leadership? Marcus's tone turned grim. They see her as a liability, too emotional. Hawthorne says she lacks the professional detachment required, that she's too involved with patients. There are already formal complaints on file about boundary violations. A bitterness rose in Ethan's throat. Clara, who had risked everything to save lives, was being vilified for caring too much, while the real thief sat in board meetings, wearing designer suits and preaching about operational efficiency. Here's what I think happened, Marcus whispered, leaning in, his words now razor-sharp. Hawthorne found traces of Clara's transfers, maybe through a routine audit, but instead of reporting it, she saw an opportunity. Clara became the perfect cover. A young nurse, naive, vulnerable, overwhelmed by emotion. A well-meaning thief, easily condemned, easily explained. A narrative the board and public would eat up, and most importantly, someone to draw attention away from her own crimes. Ethan felt as if ice had replaced his blood. If Clara was exposed, the narrative would write itself. A young nurse, emotionally compromised, stole from a sacred charity fund. And Hawthorne? She'd be hailed as the sharp-eyed hero who caught the fraud, a champion of transparency, cleaning house after years of financial mismanagement. And the timing of your accident? Marcus's voice dropped. It's starting to make sense now. She must have realized you were getting close. Maybe you asked the wrong person one too many questions. Maybe she saw it in your eyes that you were on to her. And if you disappeared, Marcus let the words hang in the air like poison. She could blame everything on your poor oversight, use your legacy as justification for reform, a purge disguised as progress. The silence that followed was suffocating. Outside, the hospital hummed with routine, rolling carts, soft greetings, idle chatter. But inside room 412, two men, bound by 20 years of friendship, sat in the growing shadow of betrayal so deep it cracked the very foundation of the place Ethan had built as a sanctuary of healing. Somewhere else in that same building, a young nurse, too brave, too kind, was walking straight into a trap she didn't even know existed. Her compassion had made her dangerous, and now it had made her disposable. 3 days later, Marcus returned. This time, he carried a different folder, labeled Succession Documents in bold legal font. But his face, it bore the weight of something else entirely, a truth too heavy to carry without sharing. I followed up on Clara's story, Marcus said softly as he sat in the same worn chair. The refugee camp, the surgeries, the children. I needed to be sure. He paused, drawing a long, slow breath. I need you to stay calm. No reaction, no movement, just listen. There was a tone in his voice Ethan hadn't heard in years, something close to dread. Dr. Elena Vasquez keeps meticulous records. Patient files, surgery logs, financial ledgers. I told her I was investigating potential misuse of funds. She was more than willing to help. Turns out she's been the victim of fraudulent charities before. Marcus opened the folder. These are the children Clara helped, he whispered. Medical files, photos, signed releases. 23 kids, ages 4 to 16. All refugees. All in urgent need of surgery, and all alive because of that fund. Ethan felt a lump rising in his throat. Was it pride, gratitude, or the aching sweetness of knowing that Catherine's legacy, even when hijacked, had still found a way to bring light into the world? But there's one more thing, Marcus said, his voice suddenly unsure. Something I almost missed. A name, hidden behind a typo in the system. He hesitated. Ethan could feel the tension in the air like the second before a car crash. Palmed of the children. A 15-year-old girl. Emergency heart surgery 6 months ago. The cost? $38,000. One of Clara's largest withdrawals. Marcus's voice dropped to a breath. She's listed as Lily Carrington. The world stopped. Ethan's breath hitched. The monitors chimed a warning. His heart pounded so loudly, it was a wonder no one burst through the door. Lily, his daughter. The child who had once looked at him with eyes full of blame for being too busy, too distant, too late to save her mother. The child who vanished 8 years ago and had never been found. I thought it might be a coincidence, Marcus said quickly. Carrington's not exactly a rare name, but... He pulled out another paper. Ugh, dug deeper. Birth certificate. Metropolitan General, 15 years ago. Mother, Catherine Marie Carrington. Deceased. Father, Ethan James Carrington. Listed as the emergency contact. Tears burned behind Ethan's closed eyes. Lily, his baby girl, the only thing left of Catherine, gone, and now, suddenly, so close. She was taken in by a Syrian family at the camp, Marcus continued gently. They've treated her like their own. For the past 2 years, she's lived there, assisting Dr. Vasquez, learning basic medical care, translating for Arabic-speaking patients. Ethan couldn't move, but his heart was screaming. Clara, brave, haunted Clara, had saved his daughter's life and had no idea. The surgery was a success. Lily's doing well. Marcus spoke slowly, almost reverently. She didn't list you as her father, but she did put your name down. Ethan Carrington. She told Dr. Vasquez that if anything were to happen to her, you should know, because you deserved to. The words hit like thunder. Even after all the years of distance, even after the silence and hurt and absence, Lily still remembered him. She still believed he had a heart, that somewhere, somehow, he would care. Clara doesn't know, Marcus added quickly. I'm sure of it. To her, Lily was just one more child who deserved to live, one more life worth saving, even if it meant risking everything to do the wrong thing for the right reason. Ethan's mind reeled. How could something so tragic also feel so transcendent? Marcus leaned back, his voice softening. I've got a secure contact line for the camp. Dr. Vasquez gave it to me. When this is over, we can reach out. He paused. Let her know you never stopped looking, that you never stopped caring. Marcus's voice faded like a memory into the background, but Ethan felt it echo through every part of him, through every crack where the pieces of a broken father still remained. Hope flickered inside him, but as quickly as it sparked, the cold weight of reality crushed it back down. Hawthorne was still out there, still circling, and Clara, the young nurse who had unknowingly brought Ethan's daughter back into his world, was now being set up to take the fall for crimes she didn't commit. She thought she was a thief, thought she had betrayed Catherine's legacy, and she was bracing for the collapse of her life, never realizing that she had just saved a father's shattered heart. It was a cold, gray Tuesday morning. Exactly 4 weeks after the staged accident, Ethan Carrington opened his eyes. The moment was orchestrated with quiet brilliance. His eyelids fluttered, his gaze unfocused, a series of blinks as if he were resurfacing from the bottom of a month-long coma. Dr. Sarah Martinez was at his side in minutes. Though she had helped plan the deception, her eyes were misty with genuine emotion. Slowly now, Ethan, she whispered, shining a penlight into his pupils. You've been unconscious for almost a month. Don't try to speak yet, just breathe. But Ethan's mind was clear, sharper than ever. He wasn't waking from a coma, he was rising from the depths of deception, armed with the truth, about Hawthorne, about Clara, about Lily. News of his miraculous recovery spread like wildfire. Flowers, cards, congratulations. The hospital buzzed with life, but Ethan watched closely. He noticed who came to see him, and more importantly, who didn't. That afternoon, Dr. Hawthorne appeared. Perfectly styled, expression measured just right, concern in her brow, delight in her smile. But her eyes? They gave her away. Ethan, she said with practiced relief, wrapping his hands in hers. This is incredible. We were so worried. The board's done everything possible to keep the hospital stable in your absence, but now that you're back, everything will be all right. Ethan met her gaze with a steady look. This woman, the one who had wanted him dead, who had stolen from dying children, was standing here, pretending to be an ally. "I'm grateful," he said hoarsely, his voice scratchy, perfectly mimicking a man still finding his strength. "I don't remember much. The accident, what happened after, it's all foggy." A flicker of relief passed over her face. "That's very common with this kind of brain trauma. Don't worry about the hospital, just rest. The board will handle things until you're fully back on your feet." For the next few days, Ethan played the part to perfection. Forgetful, weary, overwhelmed. A man learning to live again. But inside, he was calculating every move. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Then Clara vanished. No longer on night shift. When Ethan asked, he was told she'd transferred to pediatrics, but a nurse quietly confided something else. Clara had submitted her resignation, effective at the end of the month. Panic surged in Ethan's chest. He couldn't let her go, not while she still believed she was a criminal, not when she was the bridge that had brought him back to Lily. Marcus visited daily under the pretense of legal paperwork. In reality, they were finalizing their takedown. They had everything. Financial ledgers proving Hawthorne's embezzlement, dummy charity accounts, transfer logs, and the most damning, the forensic data linking her to the sabotage of Ethan's car. "Board meetings Friday," Marcus whispered. "That's when she'll strike. She's planning to propose a total leadership restructure, using your fragile state as justification. And she'll present the charity fraud, framing Clara as the culprit." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Clara doesn't know a damn thing." "I know." Marcus nodded. "She's been quiet in peds, working extra shifts. Looks like she's trying to raise money to pay back what she took." That night, Ethan made a decision. He would break every safety rule Marcus had put in place. He had to see Clara before the board meeting, before her name was destroyed. He slipped out of his room under the guise of a brief physical therapy walk. Each step down the hallway was labored, but purposeful. At the pediatric ward, he found her. She was sitting cross-legged on the playroom floor, reading The Three Little Pigs in a high-pitched, animated voice to a small bald boy, no older than 5. He was weak from chemotherapy, but still giggling between each word. Ethan stood at the door and watched. Every ounce of anger, every plan for vengeance, faded into dust. This was who Clara was. Not a thief, but a healer. Not a criminal, but someone who couldn't look away from suffering. "Miss Clara," the boy asked, yawning, "will you read me more tomorrow?" "Of course, Miguel," she smiled, brushing his cheek. "But now it's bedtime. Rest so you can get better." She stood, turned, and froze when she saw Ethan. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. "You're awake?" she whispered. "You can walk?" "Hello, Clara," Ethan said gently. "We need to talk." She slumped into a small chair, covering her face. "You heard it all, didn't you? That night, my confession." "I did." Ethan stepped into the room and closed the door. "Every word." "I'm a thief," she said, voice cracking. "I betrayed your wife. I betrayed her legacy." "No," Ethan said, cutting her off gently. "Tomorrow Hawthorne will try to destroy you at that board meeting. But you're not the criminal here. You're the scapegoat." He told her everything. The stolen funds, the fake charities, the sabotage, the truth. Clara went pale. "But I did take the money. I was wrong. Do you remember a heart surgery 6 months ago? A 15-year-old girl?" "Lily Chin," Clara said softly. "She was so brave." "Her real name is Lily Carrington," Ethan replied, voice trembling. "She's my daughter." Clara's chair scraped the floor as she backed away in shock. "She ran away after Catherine died," Ethan said, voice catching. I wasn't the father she needed. I lost her. And you gave her back to me." Clara began to cry. "I saved your daughter with money I stole from you. You gave me back the one thing I thought I'd lost forever, Clara. Catherine would be so proud." He pulled a letter from his pocket. "Lee wants to come home. She forgives me. She's just hoping I can forgive her too." Clara choked on a sob. How did something so wrong lead to something so right? "Because there are laws not written in policies," Ethan said, "only etched into the human heart." He stood and offered her his hand. "Tomorrow Hawthorne thinks she's going to bury you, but actually she'll be in handcuffs, and you'll be honored for your courage." "But Clara, I have a proposal." He smiled. "Carrington Medical needs a new director of international medical initiatives. Someone who knows healing has no borders. Someone who's willing to risk everything to save a life." Clara blinked, stunned. You're offering it to me?" "You'll work alongside Dr. Vasquez to build a sustainable field clinic in Syria, and you'll help me bring my daughter home." Next morning, the boardroom witnessed history. Hawthorne, confident and polished, began her presentation, ready to unveil the charity fraud scandal. But Ethan was already there, seated at the head of the table. Live, strong, unyielding. He unveiled the evidence. Everything. Hawthorne's crimes, the sabotage, the stolen lives. She was arrested before the meeting was over. Clara stood by his side, her resignation torn to pieces. In its place, a new contract and a mission. 3 months later, at the international arrivals gate, Ethan waited with a heart that hadn't stopped racing. And then he saw her. Lily, taller, older, stronger, but still with the same eyes he remembered. She hesitated, uncertain, until Clara stepped forward and whispered something in her ear. Lily smiled, and then ran into her father's arms. 8 years of silence disappeared in a single tearful embrace. And behind them, Clara cried too, not from guilt this time, but from something purer. Because some surgeries happen in sterile operating rooms, but the deepest healing happens in the heart. Carrington Medical would continue, stronger, braver. And in a small office overlooking the hospital's children's wing, one photo sat proudly on the desk. 23 refugee children, smiling, alive. Surrounding a young nurse, the one who changed everything.